Hello, my name is Shaun Dowse and I'm an honours year student of Garden and Greenspace Design at Scotland's Rural College. For my final year dissertation, I aim to conduct a detailed feasibility study centred around developing the historic grounds of Kilwinning Abbey, a scheduled monument incorporating the ruins of a 12th century abbey, a functioning 18th century parish church with adjoining churchyard, and a detached 19th century clock tower. All of these are category B listed. It has been deemed possible that the entire monument occupies the site of an even older Celtic Christian church, around which the town itself was founded. The site of the abbey represents several important periods in Scottish and European history. From the date of construction in the latter part of the 12th century, it grew as the physical and social heart of the town, altering the wider landscape dramatically through ingenuity in agriculture, trade and construction. The resident Terranensian monks were an international community, catalysing expansion and urbanisation both locally and across southwestern Europe. Several of their mills and farmhouses still exist around the local countryside. Since its ruin at the end of the 16th century, it has retained much of its original context within the town. Whilst the boundaries of the original precinct have been lost beneath roads and housing, along with evidence of the original monastic gardens, its treasures and its charters, it is still an important landmark. The clock tower and iconic south transept visible from surrounding towns and beaches. It's still an historic and religious centre and a public open space with strong community ties. However, as an open monument, it does little to generate revenue and consequently is not a priority for Historic Scotland investment. The site has remained largely undeveloped since remedial conservation work by the Ministry of Works in the 60s. It suffers from low-level endemic antisocial behaviour and visible neglect. The historic churchyard is left with few headstones remaining. Those which are quickly eroding. Parts of the enclosing boundary walls are in a dangerous state of disrepair. How can the neglected ancient churchyard be reinstated to re-establish lost character? Despite the monument remaining permanently open as a pedestrian thoroughfare, accessibility to those with restricted mobility is severely limited by surface type and topography. Visibility across the site is obscured by generations of inconsiderate town planning and an abundance of mature single-species tree canopies. Amenity grass is regularly mown, consequently associated biodiversity is poor. Floodlighting has been installed and directed towards the eastern and western faces of the clock tower. Generated light to the east is entirely diffused by tree canopies. The majority of the site remains in darkness at night. My dissertation will aim to identify these complex social, management and maintenance issues relative to the site, to determine the legal and physical constraints and highlight the potential for the historic monument to evolve in response to local and global conditions. Its central location within the town and the diversity in user groups offer potential to strongly influence social cohesion. I will explore the feasibility of a community management approach that an enhanced community presence could mitigate antisocial behaviour, re-establish an historic connection with nature in the heart of the town and benefit long-term conservation. The results of my investigations will inform a design-based solution, a best fit design, sympathetic to the complicated history of the space and the diverse needs of the people connected to it. There is growing awareness of the importance of boosting biodiversity as a means to improve the health of the planet, particularly in the light of the current climate emergency and global pandemic. Public attitude to changing land management practice is slowly tending towards acceptance. Governments, their agencies and local authorities have an important role to play in shaping this attitude and are taking this responsibility seriously. The Scottish Government Environment Strategy is a response to rapidly deteriorating global ecosystems. It informs the development plans of local authorities and recognises community empowerment as a force for change. A recent discussion by Edinburgh Heritage asked the question, can heritage be part of the solution? The discussion featured key speakers from Adaptation Scotland, Historic Environment Scotland and the City of Edinburgh Council. My proposal acknowledges these opportunities and looks to current projects for inspiration. Inspired by an award-winning project in Hungary, and under the guidance of the Orchard Project and Eco Congregation Scotland, the Church of Scotland have embarked on a pilot project tackling underutilised churchyards in Edinburgh and Glasgow. Work at Greyfriars has inspired further community action. Edinburgh Heritage recently announced a 2-year lottery-funded community project at Greyfriars Kirkyard to create new contemporary interpretation across the site. Historic Environment Scotland also embrace community empowerment via their Adopt a Monument programme and also offer numerous grants to aid in the handover of management responsibilities. Examples of successful projects include the renovation and establishment of a community presence at the Art Deco White House in Craigmillar, and the community-led reinstatement of pathways on the scheduled monument of Castle Hill on the Moray coast. And that's a little picture of Castle Hill there. It's now linked up to the coastal pathway. That work on Castle Hill was extremely archaeologically sensitive. Alternative methods of path construction were created to avoid disturbance to the soil structure beneath. The east area of the scheduled monument of Kilwinning Abbey would most likely have been used as a walled cemetery orchard or paradise. Other features of the monastic precinct would have incorporated medicinal herbs. To further connect with the medieval ruins of Kilwinning Abbey, I envision an area featuring a recreation of a medieval monastic herb garden. For inspiration and guidance, I looked to the gardens at Culross Palace, recreated by the National Trust for Scotland. Another such recreation is in development at the Palace of Holyrood House. These have been inspired by invaluable work of historians John Harvey and Dr. Sylvia Landsberg, specialists in medieval garden research. Finally, the people of Kilwinning have themselves created a benchmark project. Between 2010 and 2012, the Kilwinning Community Archaeology Project took place across the site, instigated by a local historian and member of Kilwinning Heritage, Jim Kennedy, and under the guidance of locally based professionals Rathmel Archaeology. The project aimed to verify previous archaeological work and further investigate the ancient roots of medieval Kilwinning. Members of the community turned up in their hundreds, receiving on-site training in excavation. Local school children were trained as tour guides, dressed in costume, playing the roles of historic figures. One schoolboy even uncovered a rare find himself during the work, an ancient medieval gaming board known as Morelis or Nine Men's Morris. I made contact with Historic Environment Scotland via an online contact form at the end of May, explaining my vision and my wish to realise it. To my surprise, I heard back from their senior casework officer within weeks. I learned something of the complexity of the site, its range of legal protections and owners, the physical constraints placed upon development. I also learned of the process of application for scheduled monument consent. Historic Environment Scotland put me in touch with their resident landscape architect, who provided me with a recent topographical survey. From there, I contacted members of North Ayrshire councils responsible for the maintenance of the churchyard and keepers of the burial records, followed by the general trustees of the Church of Scotland, who own the parish church on the site. I sought to learn some of the history of the site. I contacted Ayrshire Archaeological and Natural History Society and local historians Kilwinning Heritage, who operate the church tower as a museum. The Community Council and the local community police have also been supportive, arranging open-air socially distant meetings with myself. I'm also in receipt of detailed crime and incident data obtained via Freedom of Information request back in August. The police recommend early engagement with local youth groups. I am currently in the early stages of public consultation via a private social media group consisting at present of around 80 members of the community. I plan to keep this group running throughout the duration of my investigation. I also plan to distribute targeted questions via postal forms to those living in the immediate vicinity of the monument. Other useful resources include ongoing online community meetings via Zoom and the possibility of preparing a school presentation. There is clearly a growing public interest in the project. This must be bolstered by academic research and an understanding of the impact such a project might have on the surrounding environment. I anticipate that there may be recommendations for the creation of additional parking, questions about the provision of space for growing stock, and the creation of a viable management plan for the space is critical. There are several local community ventures who have direct experience of these challenges. Friends of Stevenson, Garnet Connections, Ayrshire Community Trust are just a few, and I will seek to liaise with them. And here's a quick look at the timeline for my initial university dissertation, part of the project. Currently if you look to the top of this chart, we've passed the preliminary site investigations, and we're now somewhere in the middle of the next two bars, establishing further contacts and the public opinion survey. I then look to do a development of my design statement alongside my analysis of the results before the Christmas break, followed by the final design work and preparation of my final portfolio. The hand-in date for this part of the dissertation is the 12th of April. However, I'm hopeful that this part of the project is a small part of the project which will help to eventually realise the project physically. And to do this, I need everybody's help. Thanks very much for listening, and please do send in your questions via email is preferable. I've got my contact details attached to this recording, but for your information, my email address is s30031993@student.sruc.ac.uk. I look forward to hearing your questions.